So Monmouth has a ton of different kinds of attractions. We have beaches. We're the northernmost beach community on the Jersey Shore, which puts us in really close proximity to New York City and northern New Jersey. So we are the kind of the first stop along the shoreline of New Jersey, which is extensive and beautiful. We've got national parks, we've got state parks, we've got gorgeous county parks, we've got flower festivals, music festivals, concerts, theater, sailing, golf. We really have a ton, and it's year round. We have a couple of large concert venues, several really good regional theater productions. And so our objective here was, with Streetlight, was to evaluate multiple destinations based on several criteria, as you can see. But we're looking at this criteria because we set some goals. We had a study vision to make every travel day better. In Monmouth County, we're living, it's a year-round community. It's not just a tourism destination. So we're living with these events. We're attending these events. A lot of us live here because we love the area, because we've been to these places and we've been to these events and these venues. So we set a study vision to make every travel day better. And our value statement was something along the lines of enhancing the travel experience for tourists and residents, because tourism is an incredible part of our culture and community. Our county website is visitmonmouth.com. And we want to reduce congestion for everybody through an actionable set of TDM strategies. We make traveling on a Friday in summer more like traveling on a Friday in the winter. The goals were to reduce peak tourism and event-related congestion, to create attractive and convenient opportunities to share rides and travel without a car, improve awareness of transportation options, and reduce parking-related frustration and congestion. We did this by developing kind of a toolbox of travel demand management strategies and tactics. So the team at Stantec applied this criteria you're seeing to a short list of locations that the staff had narrowed down from a long list.
So as David mentioned, we had a long list of event and tourism locations throughout Monmouth County. Several locations. We've done lots of sports and resorts projects when we look at a specific facility or a group of facilities, but this was the first of its kind county-wide study where we had to look at every single location and identify what are the strategies that we can come up with that would be the directly applicable to that site, but also could provide insight that others could use as well. So we had visitation and survey data from staff to create a short list of 12 event and tourism locations, and we use all of these sources to try to quantitatively and qualitatively narrow that down to a short list so we could develop some customized specific recommendations for those. And we wanted them to be a wide spectrum of sites. So it's not just all beaches, not just all event venues, but we wanted to have something that every facility in Monmouth County could take something away from. So to quantify the operating metrics, we looked at the total visitation demand by day and by hour. We looked at the location of the congestion, the visitor origins, and there were a lot of marketing applications and shared ride operations by looking at where people are coming from. Can you group those trips together? We looked at arrival and departure routes to understand what are the underutilized roadways, how much background traffic is on those roadways that's not going to a destination, but getting stuck in that congestion on the way in. And are there ways for us to route that traffic to alternative routes so that they don't contribute to the event-generated congestion and also don't have to be subject to that? We also use that to look at off-site parking. We looked at seasonal variation and pre- and post-COVID analyses. That was one of the big questions is 2020 any different than 2019? And I think when this study was first envisioned, we had envisioned some kind of field visits, but because of COVID, because of the pandemic, we really didn't have the kind of visitation that we had in 2019 during the course of this study. So that's why we had to rely very heavily on the Streetlight data for this as well. So we looked at the Streetlight data. We looked at every single analysis type, I believe, within the platform, from zone activity, origin, destination, presets, segments, top routes, and I don't think they had turning movement counts at that time. But we looked at every single one of them at scale. So I think in a total, we averaged over 500 analyses for this specific study. And we did things like this, looking at every single day over the course of 2019 and identifying when those peaks were. We kind of knew contextually, anecdotally, when those peaks occurred, but in some cases we were surprised. We thought for some of the beach communities that the 4th of July was the peak day, and we found out that there was a concert in September that spanned 2 days that actually generated a little bit more traffic than that. So it was very helpful in being able to not just identify what those peak days were, but then once we identified those, we looked at the ingress and the egress volumes on those days on specific roadways, so we can get a sense of, not just the locations where the congestion is occurring, but also how long does that congestion last? Are we looking at just the 1 hour or 1 or 2 bad hours over the course of the entire day? Or do we have destinations where we have, pretty much all day congestion? What's the mix between entering and exiting traffic? And is that also contributing to congestion? So we had zones set up around all of our candidate sites that when we tracked literally the hourly progression of traffic, the travel speeds at that location every day for an entire season. In some cases, it was very helpful in being able to take this back to the stakeholders and say, yeah, that really does represent what happens there. It happens between 12 and 3 p.m. And then you have a lot of people that are leaving over several hours, and taking that and using that to start discussions with the stakeholders.
I mean, often we were backing up what people's known experiences were with numbers. And I found that to be a really valuable part of the process. So in the community you're looking at here, I live in this community, and we kind of know what happens anecdotally, to be able to bring the data along with it. And in some cases say that, maybe it's not the way it feels, and here's how it is based on the numbers, which means there's room for improvement, was a really valuable part of the exercise.
And for each of these, we also looked at the top routes. This was essential. Again, looking at top routes for the season and then for specific days, and looking at the variations. How does a typical Friday compare to the peak Friday? We looked at not just to understand where traffic is coming from as we developed our recommendations to improve the operating conditions, but also what's the level of background traffic on these roadways. This is Ocean Avenue. It's the seemingly primary route for moving up and down the shore. So there's a lot of background traffic on these roadways that's contributing to the congestion, that's getting caught up in this. And on a normal day, this might be a 5-minute drive, but on a peak day, this could be 30 or 35 minutes. So we wanted to understand how much of that population are travelers who have an alternative. They can take another route, so we can put up detour signage out there, identify what those alternative routes are, and use that to kind of mitigate the overall congestion on the site. Because whenever you have these kinds of large sports and resorts facilities, there's never a silver bullet. It's a combination of strategies. And what I always like to say is that if you have a 1-mile queue in one lane, it's only 200 vehicles. So if you have a facility that's attracting tens of thousands of vehicles a day, you don't have to have everybody change their travel behavior. If just a small percentage of the people come along a different route, or come a little earlier or a little later, or take a different mode, then that will have a cumulative net benefit for everybody who's going to that destination, but also everyone who's just passing by the area. And then this was very impactful, being able to look at specific locations, specific roadway segments, and again, just looking at not just the demand, but also the travel speeds. How much worse is it? Looking at a location that averages 12 minutes, but for those peak days, for those peak hours, you have travel times that go up to 50 minutes on that same exact route. And just being able to identify how often does this happen and how severe is that congestion is something that without the streetlight platform, we probably would had some contextual cues, and we could talk to the stakeholders about what they felt about what the congestion was. But this was really helpful in being able to quantify it and take this back to the stakeholders and say, yeah, that makes sense, or it's worse than it feels in some cases. And then, like I said, we looked at the top routes. Another very important application from the top routes platform, not just identifying the background diversions and looking at how much of the traffic is coming in on concentrated routes and dispersing that traffic, but another very important aspect of that was identifying the park and ride locations. If we were going to have satellite parking and shuttles to some of these destinations, we wanted to make sure that we could identify if there are some existing suitable parking lots on the routes that people are already taking to the site. So we don't have to ask somebody to go out of their way to go to an off-site parking location. All we have to do is put a sign up at the closest exits and say, if you'd like to consider this, there's a park and ride shuttles, there's a park and ride lot available over here, and you can get to your destination 10, 15 minutes faster if you choose to park here. So, for example, if you're asking someone to go out of their way to get onto the Garden State Parkway to go to a location, that may not get as much of a response as opposed to just telling somebody who's already on the parkway, you just need to get off at this location. You're already using this. We know that you're already using this to get to this destination. We're just asking you to get off a few exits earlier and then take the shuttle bus in. So again, small steps like that to make the experience better for everybody. The mix of recommendations, we had a beach community that was also a major attraction community. We had a national park that had very high visitation. We had downtowns. We had an agritourism site. And so we really came up with recommendations here that fit into all of these categories. So, every downtown within the county could take something away from that. Every event venue could take something from that. Every agritourism site had something in the study in our list of recommendations that would be applicable to them. And then just looking at the strategies, we looked at the data to understand what the potential applications were. But we also developed this thematic suite of, we call them the suite of services. So we have this playing deck of cards. We have 5 suites, which are travel behavior, changing travel behavior patterns, improving the existing condition, coming up with new options, ferries to a lot of these destinations that are along the waterfront, improving communications, direct communication through navigation apps or signage and wayfinding, or just having custom apps for some of these destinations, and then parking operations. And within those, there are dozens of different strategies that we came up with, and we identified which strategies are best for specific locations. So in summary, we use all of the different tools within the Streetlight platform, and we supplemented that with a number of other data tools, and we came up with a number of recommendations in a number of categories, from guest communications, offsite parking, roadway and lane activation, and being able to have that level of detail for specific locations at the hourly level during the peak and off-peak days was very helpful for us to be able to identify which strategies are the best at certain locations, and then share those strategies with all the stakeholders so we can come up with a set of options for each site that they were comfortable with.